Hello and welcome from my library again. It's Bryan from Music Theater Wichita. It's another Wayne Wednesday. I have no idea where these are going to go or what these are going to turn into, but I hope you find them interesting. I'm already gratified that so many people have written in questions, and we'll try to answer those. And if you have more questions, we'll get to them. My video library reminds me, I did want to recommend one that a lot of people may not remember because it's been a decade since it was on. But PBS did the most amazing thing called Broadway. And it's 6 hours of incredible documentary footage and narration by Julie Andrews. And if you get it on DVD or Blu-ray, there are a ton of extras where you see outtakes and extra footage. And it's really quite a wonderful introduction to the whole history of Broadway from its very beginnings on up through about Wicked. So I recommend that. So today, the first question comes from Malachi Watson, very, very talented young man. He asks, at what point in your career did you decide to shift into directing and producing primarily instead of acting? Well, you know, as actors, we have to be kind of brutally honest about ourselves. Some actors, they are born with older faces, and try as they might, the shows they do in high school and college, they always get cast as the grandparents because they have a certain maturity, and they have to wait a long time in their careers until they really get to play the parts they were always right for. Other people are, you know, very youthful looking, and you can only play youthful looking so long before you need to move on. Now, I was still enjoying a nice acting career. I didn't really think that it was time for me to move on, but I had played in two Broadway shows, Good News as a high schooler, a college student, I guess, college student on the football team, and then Rodgers and Hart, a musical review in New York. And I was still going from job to job. I was doing a lot of TV commercials, and my look as a mid-20s guy seemed to be still commercially viable. But the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, where I had gotten my Actors Equity card, was about to do the show Rodgers and Hart that I'd been in New York, and they invited me to come direct it. And so it was a material I knew. I didn't think that we had quite gotten the production right in New York, and I was curious to have my own stab at it. It was a theater where I was familiar, and I knew how the place worked, and they knew me, and I felt like if I were not doing a good job, there'd be ample people around to support me and help me. So it turned out to be a very nice experience, and I ended up doing two more summers at the Old Globe in San Diego. And that opened up the whole world of being a professional director. And it turns out there's an awful lot of actors out there, but not quite as many people who are anxious to take the responsibility of putting the whole thing together. So, and I knew that I wasn't a trained director particularly any more than I was a trained actor. But I knew that I had worked with a lot of directors, some of whom were very effective and some of whom were less so. And there are times you get to a place where you think, well, I know I don't know everything, but I wouldn't do that to somebody. Or I wouldn't let somebody go out on stage looking like that. Or, you know, those kinds of things. So after a while it comes, put up or shut up. And then I really hadn't thought about producing, but I had been here to Wichita in 1986 to direct Oklahoma and to play Charlie and Where's Charlie. I spent 4 weeks here. I moved on back to New York and then on to other cities with jobs. And 2 years later, John Holly, the producer at the time, called and said he had taken a job in Houston and that he would be leaving at the end of the month. And had I ever thought about being a producer? And when I was here 2 years earlier, I seemed nice. So would I care to try it? And you know, my dad had hoped I would be a lawyer or something respectable. And the idea of my actually having a desk for one summer, that seemed very appealing. So I thought, I'll do this, I'll learn from it. And I didn't really know, Malachi, that I'd be here 32 years later. And I still get to direct and I still get to act from time to time. But I seem to have found the area that taxes me the most satisfyingly and lets me have my hand in a lot of things. So that's how it worked for me. Kevin McDaniel asked, what were you thinking on the day that you were first hired as artistic director of MTW? Did you think you'd still be the leader of this successful organization for 30 plus years? Kevin was in my first performing company. He was here the first 2 years I was here. Still a wonderful, talented friend. No, I didn't think I was moving here, and I didn't think I was stopping being an actor and director. I didn't realize that I was going to have this job. But each year it presented new challenges and new satisfactions. And after a while, this just clearly was home. So thanks, Kevin. Carrie Hendricks said, you mentor and encourage so many young people even after they've left the MTW nest. Who has been your mentor or the person that helped you through your career? Well, I mentioned the Old Globe Theater in San Diego. Its founding director was a gentleman named Craig Knoll, who was, as it turns out, one of the best directors, if not the best director I ever worked with. And he was the one that saw something in me that gave me my professional equity card. And then he was the one that hired me years later to come back and start my directing career. So I would have to say he gave me a great start. The other person, when I began, I really knew no one in show business. And at the Old Globe Theater, I was doing a production of Woody Allen's Play It Again, Sam, playing the Woody Allen part. And Ernie Flatt came to see it, and he was the choreographer for the Carol Burnett show and for Broadway shows like Sugar Babies and Lorelei. And he came to see it because he knew the leading lady that I was playing opposite. And at the end of that production, he said, you know, I think you're going to work. If I can ever help, let me know. If you ever want to come watch the Carol Burnett show. So even though I was still in the Navy at the time, had a few more months yet, but I took a week off and I went up and I watched him put the Carol Burnett show together from Monday through Friday. And I've reflected on this because it was a very similar schedule to what we do at Music Theater Wichita in the summer. Each day a certain number of things have to happen, and then on Friday, in their case, they would do the show in front of the cameras. And watching the organization that took and the very positive attitude and the amount of prep that went into making things go well, that was very, very influential. And Ernie Flatt stayed in my life till the end of his, and he was helpful in my very first Broadway audition. He helped coach me on my song that I did for the New York producers, a song called Never Swat a Fly. I did for the producers of Good News, and they ended up hiring me and putting the song into the show. So that was a successful audition, I would say. And it was Ernie Flatt who helped me pull all of that together. So I've lost my questions. Here we are. One more. Oh, Stephen Smith, that's my brother. What is Wayne's all-time favorite stage role he's played in or outside Wichita? And Donna Rapor asks, with which character from a musical do you most identify? Well, I've got 3 roles that are top favorites. The Will Rogers Follies is an amazing show, and I got to do 5 productions of it. And I love that because Will Rogers was such an amazing, complete man, of authentic, really, a truly marvelous man. And every time you step into his boots, you have to take on his mentality. You have to read up, because the first thing you do in that show is open today's newspaper, wherever you are, whatever city you're in. You open today's newspaper and you comment on the headlines as if you were Will Rogers commenting on them. So you have to steep yourself in his sayings and his philosophy and ennobling. And he was so smart and such a great humanitarian that I always felt when I got to play Will Rogers, I became a better person because of it. The second show I really love, I got to do 4 productions of, Me and My Girl. It's British music hall comedy, song and dance. Cockney guy comes into money, still loves his girl. It's silly, but it really is a marvelous journey, and it's so happy to play and happy for the audience. They never expect it to be as funny as it is, and it really is a great show. And then the third one, The Drowsy Chaperone. Well, it's about a man of a certain age who lives with a large collection of records and recordings and is obsessed with old musicals and can endlessly recount details about them. There were many people who saw the show in New York and came up to me and said, have you seen that show? That's you. Well, I beg to differ. The man in the show is much sadder than I am. I've had an awfully good life, and he's only dreamed about his. But I do relate to this character, and I've loved getting to play him. So that's enough about me. Let's ask some questions next week about other things. I really appreciate you letting me come into your video device and talk to you, and let me know what else you want to know. And don't hesitate to watch Flashback Friday, where we're going to talk about a specific show and show you some great clips from it. Bye bye.